Live.
Hey, girl, walk over it.
Welcome to my house.
Go on. Look, a blanket.
Oh.
That Lila
Oh. Oh. What a world. What a world. Live topic discussion. Let's see here. Baby girl. Top 6 political. Nope. A really weird way to die. Episcopal priest recounts recent stabbing. Okay. Pastor Jack Graham implores Christians to proclaim truth in a shifting culture. Why isn't the church doing that? ATF urges churches to take enhanced security measures amid recent attacks. A branch of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm and Explosives is urging churches to take extra precautions amid an increase of houses of worship in the New England region being victimized by arson and vandalism in recent months. In a statement released November 8th, the Boston Bureau of Federal Law Enforcement Agencies outlined recommended actions for churches and religious institutions to take in light of arson incidents directed at places of worship in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Well, isn't that just fantastic? The agency cited arson attacks in Franklin and Kingston in Massachusetts, as well as Woonsocket. Wow, Woonsocket. What a city. Collaboration with local law enforcement. Hey, Tampa. Urges all religious institutions to take enhanced security measures to protect their congregations and facilities, the statement declared. While there are currently no specific threats, ATF and local authorities recommend vigilance and proactive steps to prevent potential incidents. Wow, I gotta look into that. I didn't know this was like an actual thing that was going on. I thought it was an isolated incident. The voice channel is open. It is going to be a light night. I got messages from a few people that they will not be present. So it might be short. We'll see. We'll see how much y'all want to talk about the self-defense. Unfortunately, early last evening, we experienced a fire in the upper sacristy of St. Mary's Church. So there's a few of them. I did not know this. That's not great news. It's not great news at all. How unfortunate, man. Young Christian woman seeks justice after... That is also very sad. 2,400 anti-Christian hate crimes reported in Europe. Germany sees 105% rise. This is the thing. We all knew it was coming. We all felt it. We felt it blowing around in the wind. Anti-Christian hate crimes in Europe reached a total of 2,400 incidents since 2023, according to a report that compiled data from the police and civil society sources across 35 European countries. Ain't that just phenomenal? What a beautiful thing. France, Germany, the UK, higher numbers of recorded incidents, according to the report, which draws on data from various sources, including the OSCE. Wow. Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. 100% increase. That's wild. I wonder where these are coming from. I wonder who is committing these. Or if it is just a generalized thing. Wow. Wow, man. Oh, Tampa, I didn't see you. You should be good.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, great.
Oh, man. Hang out like one more minute and then just roll.
I know. Is it just us?
Yeah, this happens every year. It's the holidays.
Oh,
Mid-November.
yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, same. We don't go anywhere or do anything. Yeah, everybody's traveling or just like, doing other stuff. Christmas is dead. We probably just won't do anything. We'll see. If there's a few of us, then I'll do it.
Oh,
'Cause-
Venus is here.
yeah, I'll be here too. I got nothing else to do. This is it.
Rodriguez has her hand up.
All right, she's in. You are here. You made it.
Yeah, I'm here.
Rodri, hey, have you seen this? Germany sees a 105% increase in specifically Christian hate crime. And in Europe, they had a total of 2,400 incidents last year.
Wait.
I didn't realize this. I'll put it in Discord if you want to look at it.
They're not being. This is up to date. This is a current article.
Yeah, this is current.
I will say, Gen Z has the least favorable views of Christians than any other generation.
I just wonder if that's what it is, or if a lot of it. I'd be curious to know, especially because of where it's reporting from. I wonder if a lot of it is Islamic fueled, because it's a really big population.
That's the fastest growing religion right now, right?
Right, and especially in Europe. Europe is like it's heavy, super heavy. Similar to Canada, but way worse from what I understand. But just looking through this was wild. But yeah, it's current. I mean, it's last year, but that's current for statistics.
Right.
And it includes, I think, through March of this year on some of them.
I just worry, like, I don't mean to sound like an asshole, but like in terms of the sources, because like I know that there's a lot of like fear mongering and like, oh my God, we have it the worst and we're so unnecessarily dramatic.
For sure.
Do you know what the discrimination per se is?
No, I'm gonna read it when we get off. I just was like skimming through it while we were reading.
I saw the headline. Yeah.
I read a bit of it, but no, I'm interested though, so I'll look into it when we're done. Because it doesn't look like they make it super clear.
Yeah.
The motives included, here you go, political right, 31 incidents, religious ideology, 16 incidents, and political left, 14 incidents. On the cases documented by OIDCA.
Yeah, but it doesn't actually say what is going on.
Involved.
I hate saying it, but like in terms of like violence, I mean, I feel like we're more inclined to, beat someone with the Bible and try to get, Jesus into them more than. But this is saying we're the victims, right?
Yeah, this is against Christian people. It says 21 of the incidents was radical Islamist in background. Anti-religious movements were 14 of the incidents, and radical left motivate, which I like for clarity's sake, I want to know what that is in the mind of the writer. What is the radical left? Because this is Europe, Germany, so it's like different, similar but different.
Well,
13 incidents.
Yeah, I mean, one of the beauties about being over here is we're not on the front lines of certain things that are going on, like what's happening in Palestine and Israel. I'm wondering if that's a huge factor, especially because Gen Z was either not born or barely being born around the time of 9/11. Because like my generation, we were more afraid of like Islam and Middle Eastern people. And then now, I was shocked to hear my kids, that are young and I guess Gen Z say like, no, mom, like Israel is bad and Palestinian, blah blah blah, and I was
Oh
like, oh
wow.
wow, like I just didn't expect that, and apparently that's what it is for most people in their generation. And I'm like, well, what about this? Or the Bible says that, and they're like, no, 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 mom, inhumane is inhumane because that's what their generation is all about. So I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
like also really in my generation and some of us older ones, like we have a lot of different views about Russia
Oh yeah.
because things were going on with like the Cold War in the 90s. So I don't know. Lord help us, Tampa. How are you? I'm not going to ask your age because I don't want anyone asking. But I'll just say, like, what generation, I guess, do you kind of associate more
I
with?
just turned 44 in October.
Oh, girl, I'm not going to tell you what you're saying.
I am on the cusp.
Yeah, we're close.
I'm on the cusp of Gen X and millennial. So
Woo woo. I
Is
will
it
never as a
is
millennial.
yeah, you both then. Like is 9/11 the thing? If you had to like recall the most catastrophic
Yeah.
memory thing that you've had, would that be
yeah,
it?
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was our Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I guess Gen Z would be, I don't know, the coronavirus, but I think
Yeah.
I don't know how it is for others. Like, Lord help
Gen
us,
Z.
like for me, I was a military wife, so immediately as soon as my ex-husband was enlisted, he was immediately gone to the war. So I didn't know if that was like just me or everyone. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's interesting. I was young when 9/11 happened, but I was old enough to like know what was up. Like I remember waking up and the radio blaring in my house, and my dad like, told me what was going on, and like I didn't go to school that day. It was, but I think anybody basically who's any younger than me, it's got to be like that's the cutoff because I barely remember. I don't know
Were
exactly.
you?
I'd have to do the math
I
on how
remember.
old I was, but
I remember you living in Florida. So do you know where
no,
you?
when that happened, I was in Colorado.
Okay, because I know when it happened, there was like this Independence Day type rumor, like the movie where
Mm-hmm.
supposedly they were picking up like every city.
Yep.
Because you had like DC and then over in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia or something. And I remember like I'm from LA, so there was a lot of fear. I remember going on around that, and we had the LA riots like not even 10 years prior. So there was,
Right.
yeah, I remember it was stressful. And my mom was a hospital worker. So,
Oh man, yeah.
yeah, I remember it was, oof, yeah, that was stressful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think COVID will be the thing for a lot of kids. And I think my kid is where I was, where like she was old enough to remember, but like she was super young and she doesn't understand the scope. And I don't think I fully understood the scope of 9/11 when I was a kid, but
Right.
like I remember it happening and she'll definitely remember COVID.
Well, I mean, she has social media.
Yeah, true. It changes a lot. Yeah, that wasn't
Right.
around when.
I remember like going into Whole Foods when COVID happened. I was like, you guys grab that paper because there was like these little papers that were up and they were rationing like bread and eggs and different things. I was like, take the pic. They're like, Mom, you're nuts. I was like, no, you're gonna want to show your kids.
Yeah. Yes. Remember.
Which is nuts. But I was like, no, this is insane.
I get it though. I get it's
6 feet apart
wild.
and blah blah blah.
Totally wild. And kids, I think the kids who are in high school, I think really resent it. The kids who are younger just kind of get that it was weird, that it was a weird thing.
For 9/11?
No. Sorry, COVID.
Oh, COVID.
Yeah. The high school kids, I think, all the ones that I've talked to, like they resent it and thought it was nothing but bad. But then on the flip side, interesting, college kids for the most part seem to think that not that the disease was good, but the way it was dealt with was like proper. High school kids don't seem to agree with that.
No, so my daughter was a senior in 2020. So my oldest one, so she didn't get a prom. She had a really bootleg ghetto like graduation ceremony. Like it was.
It's crap.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sucks. A lot of these kids had like important things taken. Sports, people who are like really involved in
Yeah.
sports got all sorts of delayed. Nat said that's how 9/11 was for me. I remember it being a huge deal, but I didn't really understand what happened. Yeah, I think you and I are roughly the same age. I guess I didn't understand the idea of what it meant for the country. Right. Maybe I just saw it as an accident. I didn't really get the idea of war, terrorism. Yeah, I think I understood I understood the terrorism thing, but not like to actual scope, but like I understood what it was. But I don't think I understood the gravity of it. I didn't, I never would have I just didn't wrap my mind around it. I just knew it was really, really bad and people were seriously freaking out. But it wasn't
Yeah.
until later that you're like, oh shit, that was actually really wild. And then we went to New York within, I want to say like 6 months or so. So we got to see Ground Zero. And still super young, but like it was atrocious to see. It was horrific for sure. Wild, wild stuff.
Yeah, the vibe stayed somber for months. It was awful.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
awful.
But then to a point, it seemed like people were together to a certain degree too. It was like
Yeah,
an odd
something-
time. There was
Yeah,
camaraderie.
something like- yeah, for sure. Something you wouldn't see today.
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
No, I totally agree with that. All right. Well, let's bounce onto this. So Christian engagement and violence, self-defense specifically, but we can broaden it if we want to. Patricia was 4 years old. I had to be like close to that then. I don't remember. I need to do the math. I need to do the math. I am not a
Was
math
anyone
person.
else in college? Oh my god. Okay.
David is an older gentleman, so he's in here. He's just slow rolling. I think he probably would have been out of college, if I remember right, from how old he was saying he was. Okay. Can Christians engage in violence? Specifically self-defense, but we can broaden it if we want to. As usual, examples first. So the Old Testament, Exodus 22, 2-3 says, if a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. But if it happens after sunrise, the defender is guilty of bloodshed. Interesting for kind of like two reasons. Like one, this is very specific and it's specific to law. So does it even relate at all? But it is an example of a similarity. The passage suggests that self-defense is permissible, especially when the threat is immediate and life-threatening. Again, I don't fully agree because this was specific to law. So this would be us extrapolating that from the Old Testament law and using it today, which I think is pretty clear not to be done. But it's an example of the topic. Then Nehemiah 4:17-18, you guys can rudely interrupt me anytime. 4:17 and 18 says, those who carried material did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. Here, Nehemiah's people preparing to defend themselves while rebuilding Jerusalem, indicating the legitimacy of self-defense in protecting a community. This is a better example, in my opinion, because it's not strictly law. So it's more fair to extrapolate it out. And it's a pretty decent example of like preparing to do violence in order to protect something that was seen as wholesome or good in the eyes of God. I thought it was a good one. Any thoughts on those before I jump on?
I almost feel like it's almost like I feel like, of course, war is a necessary evil, but I feel like even then there was some ethics that were involved. It's almost like these OG Geneva Conventions.
Yeah.
Which I think makes me feel a lot better. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously existed. So then it's like a question of, does it apply today? Does it cross the hermeneutical bridge from then to now? And so we move forward. New Testament.
Right.
Luke 22:36. He said to them, but now if you have a purse, take it and also a bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak to buy one. This gets thrown out a lot in defense of self-defense. Jesus is acknowledging the need for practical self-defense. In a way, he's at least insinuating it. Although the context shows it wasn't to incite violence, but to prepare for challenges ahead, which is a common theme with this topic, is that very little is there overt violence, but relatively often there is preparing for violence that might be done to you.
So more self-defense and less initiation.
Right. Yeah. Reactive instead of instigating. Matthew 5:39. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also, which is one of the obviously most common ones that gets thrown out in terms of being passive, for passive Christianity. It emphasizes non-retaliation and the importance of responding to personal insults with grace rather than aggression. And that is the key, in my opinion, and is that the greater context seems more of interpersonal communication. There's no real reason to extrapolate it to violence, but I to be fair, like exegetically fair, I could see why people would. And to a point, I think they have grounds. So then it becomes, well, how much is in favor of just that? How much is in favor of self-defense? And if you do aggregate the data, which I did, there's way more. There are a number more examples in both the Old and the New that would defend the concept of self-defense if there's an aggressor towards you. Much more of those than examples like this, where we're being told to be passive in the face of evil. Balancing justice and peace. Romans 12:18 says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Very specific. Very, very good verse for this as kind of an umbrella. When it is possible, as much as it depends on you individually, because you're involved, live at peace with everyone. So as much as you can in every situation or any circumstance, live at peace whenever it is possible, which is it is the umbrella that covers all. And then the rest of the verses are kind of okay, if it is not possible, well, then what do you do? And the Bible seems to point in the direction of violence in the defense of the innocent. Nat said the concept of being war crimes kind of shows there's at least some level of order in place. Yeah, totally agree. And then she said the problem with the retaliation argument could potentially be that they are reacting to some reason they feel they were wrong. In the example of Israel-Palestine, they'd both argue they're victims. That's actually a really good point. They're both claiming to react to years and years of violence, so it makes you wonder how far back it can go. Yeah, actually, that's a great question. Is there an expiration? Is there a statute of limitations on violence?
I mean, there should be, because I mean, even to this day, we're literally seeing violence in the same countries that's been going on for centuries over the root of it. The same issues.
Yeah. And I mean, the true reality is like the entire world, every culture was built on violence at some point. So like, how far back do you trace it? And for which groups? Who didn't partake in violence? I guess would be my question.
I think the part that concerns me, though, and I don't know how to say it without getting a little too intense or political, but it's a little bit different when you're talking about like blundering and pillaging and different things like that versus truly inhumane, torturous, evil acts. You know what I mean? I feel like that's just a whole different department, which is why you have things, like I said, like the Geneva Conventions and different things like that. And I think it's even in Leviticus where God even has rules when it comes to slavery. Like, you're not allowed to strike your slave more than, is it 3 times or something along those lines? So, and that's not my opinion, whether I think it has nothing to do with slavery, but just that there's even a level of like, hey, like it only goes so far.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
What I mean, because I just think there's a lot of things historically that have been really hidden, that aren't mentioned, that were truly, I don't know, brutal, barbaric, however you want it. It was not your typical,
So so let's narrow it for like the sake of argument. Then do any cultures exist broadly? Because all cultures are basically mixed to some degree at this point for the most part. Are there any like groups or cultures that did not get where they are today by engaging in normal violence, which usually, realistically, included things like sexual assault and slavery? I don't know of any that at some point, because the original like top question was, how far back should we blame people, or could you justify violence for? Because Nat had brought up Palestine and Israel, which is a really, really, really good point, because that's a great example. So how
I
far
agree.
back? Because everybody, Islam did it, Christians did it. We engaged in all kinds of war, all slavery, in two different contexts. I guarantee there was sexual assault at certain points when things are being taken over. Like, it's the history of everybody. So at some point, I think it does, like, there does have to be a point where people move on, and I wonder what that point would be. Israel and Palestine will never move on. They have been at war forever. They will probably be at war forever until one of them is possibly extinct. I don't see that
All
war
in the
ending.
name of God.
All in the
Yeah.
name of God, right?
Yeah, I can definitely say, at least from a Jewish perspective, it doesn't sound like raping is part of the deal. It sounds like, you know, God's like, okay, either kill them all and take their booty and, you know, all their belongings and their kids. But I don't really see slavery as something that's kind of mentioned. I don't actually.
So then, as Christians, if we had to kind of like, if we were a council and we had to put together a doctrine for the church, and we're saying, okay, violence in these scenarios is okay, and self-defense is okay. Somebody comes in your house, threatens your kids, you can take them out. What would our written doctrine be to the church under our moral framework for how far back can violence go, where you're justified in doing it? If somebody killed your wife 10 years ago and you finally found them, are you justified or not?
I think. Go ahead, please.
Patricia.
Hi.
Hey.
Were you telling me to go ahead?
Yeah, someone was talking, so I'm trying to like gather my thoughts. So yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, I don't know. I was just looking at some Bible verses about self-defense.
Yeah, you guys are so great over there in Canada and your maple syrup and stuff. It's awesome. But
we're just way more passive aggressive, I think.
That's true.
You know, you guys are just awesome. Like,
That's
there's
true.
no complaints and no issues with you guys, like, ever.
No, it's all quiet. Everybody keeps quiet, and all the corruption happens like under wraps. Nobody wants to talk about it.
The good old days. Here, Nat said the issue beyond that is that the violence keeps compounding. At any given point, it only went back to a year or two because they never really ended. No, not justified. That's a result of revenge, not self-defense or defending anyone in particular 10 years later, which I think that's the point.
Yes, I can definitely side with that, because I think the other thing too is, like, when it comes to like the personality of the person who's avenging or getting revenge, there's a huge difference between vindication and justice and actually taking pleasure and enjoying in the suffering of others. This is where it gets really dark and humane, and I will definitely say is so not of God. Like, if I know evil people who have harmed, you know, my family, and I would not be there for their execution. It's like, okay, if they're done, they're done. I don't take pleasure in anyone's suffering. I don't know.
Right. So
But
I
what
guess
if they're justifying it in like? What if they say like, oh well, I'm trying to defend any future person to be harmed, so I'm going to take care of this person.
So it's like going back to Dinah. That.
Go ahead. So what makes self-defense first? I think this will help. What is self-defense? Is it where a threat happened 10 years ago, 1 year ago, an hour ago? Or is self-defense something that is happening now? There is an immediate threat in the moment.
I would say self-defense is definitely going to be immediate.
Right. Right. So then what Patricia said, I think, is the next question, which is okay. So then the back to that would be, all right, well, this person has committed violence against every woman he's ever dated. I have him here right now. Do I stop the potential of future violence? No guarantee. Potential, track record, good probability of it to continue, but no guarantee. Do I take him out? Is that justified? I think that was a great point that she brought up, because that's the next logical step.
I don't
No,
know.
I don't think so.
It's a little hard because it sounds like, especially Old Testament, right? We do see where it's like God is kind of like, oh, you need to invade this group over here, and you're gonna kill all that breeds. And this is the part where I was telling you like a couple days ago, where I kind of feel like I should take a back seat, because like the mom, like part of me is just like, don't you just need to take care of like what's there right in front of you and leave it be? But apparently that's not the case. That we I don't want to confuse what's like description in the Bible versus prescription. So sometimes because things happen doesn't mean that's the way we should be doing it. But
are you playing God at that point, rather than you protecting what is innocent by committing violence? If you're choosing to do it with no immediate threat, at that point, are we playing God with people's lives?
Yeah.
You're choosing,
Yeah.
right? You may have a lot of evidence. There may be a
I'm gonna say no.
lot behind it.
Oh yeah, I still say no. Actually,
that you're not playing God.
No, I mean like I know I bring really.
I get both sides. Like as a parent and even like as a husband, I totally get it. There's a huge inclination in me that would be like, yeah, if there's any possibility of a threat, that's too much. But the other side of it is the ethical side. But possibly, yeah, because you never actually know. So even if this guy has been nothing but horrible to kids, and I know he could potentially hurt my kid, that's enough for me in my head to be like, that is too much. He needs to go. But is it ethical is a totally different question. Is that me doing God's job? What's that?
Yeah, it's probably wiser to find like a better way to take care of the situation rather than violence. Like,
right.
Okay, maybe you're more. I'm more hardcore than I think, because one of the examples that constantly comes to mind was, and like I said, I know I bring this up a lot, but Dahmer, and the person who ended up killing Dahmer in prison actually claimed that he felt led by God to do it.
Lovely.
Which does sound like, right, like way out there and insane, but I also know that Dahmer was kind of like bullying people and like doing grotesque acts to kind of like reenact the whole reason why he was there to begin with. So it does kind of make you wonder. I also do. I just have so many questions. Like, I do know the person who committed the act of violence against Dahmer happened to be in the exact same demographic of Dahmer's victims. So then it's like, okay, did he do this just revenge, or what is this person's like? I have so many questions. But then I don't know.
Well, here, Nat replied. Nat said, that just sounds like straight revenge to me, because he's already in custody and the threat to future victims has steady been removed. But not necessarily. In prison, people still are victimized, you know?
Right.
So to a point, like we're the general public, children, women, protected. But in a prison, like he could still have victims. For sure.
Especially if you know who his victims were, Nat. I don't know if you know, but they were not women and children. They were a specific type of group of men. So it would have been like a free-for-all for him in prison, you know.
Yeah.
And if he was mocking it, you know, it's just a whole different. I don't know.
because that's the other side, is like, so in the case of, we have somebody who's committed atrocities in the past, they're now face to face with your family. Do you take them out? Do you not? The other ethical end, like Patricia alluded to, was maybe there's another way. The other way would be governmental law enforcement. So that, which opens a whole nother thing that I don't really want to go into because we don't have enough time. But then it's like, well, how much faith do you have in the government? What is that system? How does the system work? Is the system fair? Is the person actually going to go to prison? Some of them get off when they go to prison. How long would they be there? Is that fair? Blah, 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 blah. But that's kind of the other side of it, is like, you either remove the threat by removing their soul from their body, or somebody has to put them in a cage, which doesn't necessarily remove victims, depending on what their thing was. It's like in Dahmer's case, apparently, I don't know a lot about him, but apparently from what you're saying, it wouldn't have removed the threat to other people. There would have still been potential victims.
Yeah, so like I see some of the stuff that Nat's saying on there. So Nat, his demographic, I actually feel safe. It was not women, it was men. And it was a specific, like, men of color. So he was very much still a threat in the, you know, in the prison system. Especially the fact that he was kind of joking. It's almost like, hey, I did this and I got away with it, and I'm here, you know, like, still be afraid of me type thing. So it's definitely different.
Nat, the rate is between 100 and 200 a year. I can tell you with some experience that violence in prison is extremely common, and murder in prison is also pretty common, especially for people who have nowhere to go. If they're doing life already, the only place they can go is like a supermax, and that's it. There's nowhere else to go from there. So it's relatively common. It's 10 of every 100,000. Which, when you condense that to the prison system, like, it's a relatively high number. It's more than double the rate outside of the system. So it's high.
So in homicide, you're saying it's not exactly redeemable, right? Like, it's just...
No, she just asked about statistics. How often, how likely are you to get away with murder in jail versus outside? Well, you're twice as likely to be murdered in jail than you are outside. So it's a valid threat. David said, in my head, he goes, talking about our metaphor or theoretical person. But when the decision happens for real, I let the legal system handle it. In other words, I take no violent action. I think that would be most people's stance, is like, in my head, he needs to die. But in actuality, the person would probably, like, let the legal system handle it. It's a lot of faith in the legal system. Mm-hmm. Yes, I know that in terms of demographics, and I don't know. I think it's at least significantly decreased that threat overall. I agree. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think that's where it needs to go. It's tough. It's tough. If there's an immediate threat, I get it. If there's not an immediate threat, you're kind of potentially creating one. If you then try to engage violence with somebody who's not engaging in it with you, because maybe they weren't going to be violent, and maybe now they feel like they need to defend themselves. Tactical awareness. It's like you open the door for other things. Whereas if somebody walks in with a gun pointing it at your child, there's an immediate threat. There's no question. So the person just needs to go. But if somebody just has a track record of something and now they're in your vicinity, maybe even like talking in such a way, you're still like, you're adding to the risk potentially.
I don't know. I kind of disagree when it comes to, like, certain things like serial killers and stuff. If there's a pattern, if there's a habit, then yeah.
I mean, I get it for sure. It's a probabilities game at that point, which maybe take them out is the right call. But here, let's throw some more stuff out here. So what are some arguments for self-defense biblically? Human life is sacred is one of the big ones. The Bible has a huge emphasis that human life is valuable because it is made in the image of God, which is a valid point. Genesis 1:27, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he was created, that he created them. Male and female, he created them. Exodus 20:13, you shall not murder, which is just a dumb one to throw out. Because again, this is the law and in a specific context. And then not but a handful of chapters later, God has people murder other people. So not the best example. But human life is sacred is valid because it is. So then you have to have the argument of, is all human life sacred? At any point, due to actions, does human life become not sacred due to their actions?
It does sound like there's different rules for war versus
For sure.
individualistic circumstances. So
What about Ananias? What about the couple in the New Testament?
and Sapphira.
Yeah, they were kind of murdered by God. But then the argument is, well, it doesn't apply to God. If God would have had Paul do that, it would be different than God doing it, which is a fair argument.
They weren't supposed to be doing it in the first place, so I can't say they weren't warned. That's a little bit different.
Well, sure, but it's murder all the same. With reason, without reason, still murder. And that said, it brings us back to war for gain versus war in defense, trying to gain land versus trying to defend your people against the invading party. I mean, they did some invading just to take, though, too.
Yeah, like with Joshua.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there was a moral reason, so says the Bible. Anybody outside of the religious context, though, would just say they're just doing what everybody's doing. They're murdering and killing because they want, not because of a godly mission.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to sound cliche because I don't want to say like our ways are not his ways, but
I mean, stay in a Christian context, though. I shouldn't have said that. Stay in a Christian context. So in a Christian biblical context, that would be justified, whether it was to defend themselves or to take land, because God so defined it. Because that is the deciding factor in a religious system, is what is God's will. So regardless of the reason, land or defense, murder in that case would be justified. Like biblically, because God said so. Outside of that is when it gets tricky.
I mean, I feel like a lot of this is really important when it comes to theocracy, right? Because I forgot where it was in scripture where they had like too many men and they were like drinking in the river, and God was like, okay, those who are like lapping up the water, they're not going to be in war, but those who are scooping it with their hands,
Yeah.
So obviously it like made their numbers significantly smaller and smaller. And I don't know that actually makes sense in war. And it also doesn't make sense in what God was kind of doing in general with war historically, which concerns me because I feel like there's not really a pattern, and it's almost like
There's not.
circumstantial, and it all depends on the instructions of God. So it's
hard to swallow because you're right.
Yeah.
There is no pattern. The war and violence in the Old Testament was something that I did spend a lot of time on. There's no pattern, and it's why I wrote my thesis on contrasting God of the Old Testament with Jesus Christ, because in my opinion there's a vast difference. But going through the violence of the Old Testament, there's no pattern. It's contingent entirely on God's will. So it's tough. Nat just said that's something she struggles with. Even if God says it's okay, it still makes me uncomfortable. It makes you uncomfortable because the whole premise behind Christianity specifically, not so much Judaism, because it was different. Under Christianity, we had the golden rule. We had this very clean-cut moral framework to live under. And most things could fit clean and nice under that framework. In the Old Testament, that is not the case. There were tons of laws. Many seem completely arbitrary. Some seem odd. Some are culturally odd because we live in a totally different world now. But if you take yourself back to that time, some of them are still just really odd and arbitrary. So it's because God said so. And then when you go through the violence of the Old Testament, it's because God said so. In the New Testament, it's different. It seems like Jesus brought order to a lot of that stuff, but it's tough to swallow a lot of the violence when you really get into it. Patricia said she agrees with Nat. I feel resistance to it, and honestly, I feel like it's a fallible area, but that's just me. Yeah.
But okay, the other question I have that I kind of mentioned a couple days ago for Nat and Patricia is like, as women, and I didn't want to go there, but it's like we're kind of created to give life. So this is the part where I was a little bit more curious to hear, from other men what their insight or opinions might be in that department, because it could be very different.
On giving life rather than taking it away.
I think I'm created for life. Like literally to bring life into this world, like many other women.
Yeah.
We nurse, that's literally what yeah.
Okay.
And men are the hunter-gatherers, and yeah, so I don't know how other men of the faith believe or think about it. I'm just really curious.
Well, if you're still here, you should try to respond to that, and I'll get into it at the end here, because maybe this will relate. So, protection of innocent life, Proverbs 24:11 and 12. Rescue those being led away to death. Hold back those staggering towards slaughter. You could argue woman's position, part of it, and this is one of many examples of protection of innocent life. Then direct examples of justified defense. Exodus, again, if Thesis caught breaking in at night and struck, we went over this one. So very specific, but the law provided a specific case for the Israelites where self-defense was justified, where an immediate life-threatening danger arises in the dark, but it also pushes you towards restraint. Kind of displaying that unnecessary or excess force is not justified when the threat then subsides, which is kind of what we were talking about before. Immediate threat is immediate threat. That is self-defense. Outside of that, you are committing violence, or there's at least an argument that you're committing violence if there is no immediate threat. And this is one of a number in the Bible that kind of set up that whole context, which is really nice. Scott, I think, replied. So here, Old Testament, in the Old Testament, self-defense was permitted and sometimes commanded. Exodus 22, we talked about. Deuteronomy 19:4. This reflected the culture and societal norms of ancient Israel, right? Including law. New Testament, Jesus' teachings emphasized love, forgiveness, and non-retaliation. Matthew, Luke, I think we have those. Shifting focus from retribution to compassion versus explicitly prohibiting self-defense. So he gave a little synopsis there. Preparation for protection. Luke 22, I think this is one. No, he didn't have this one. Luke 22:36 says, but now if you have a purse, take it in a bag also. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak to buy one. We went over that one too. So that was one of those examples. Romans 13:4, government and justice. We touched on one of the other Romans verses, which is the umbrella for all of violence basically in the Bible. For the one is authority, for the one authority is in God, for the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. There are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. This is one I don't ever see anybody use during these arguments, and I don't understand why. It's brutal, but it's also rather clear. And it has context. It has the governmental context to it. It's a good example. Now, against self-defense. Arguments against. We've touched on a few of them. But Jesus' command to love your enemies. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. We went over that one, Matthew 5:44. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Pretty specific. If you read all of 5, you gain some clarity. But the honest exegetical pull is that he did say them, and he seemed to mean what he said. But are they all encompassing is then the question. Examples of nonviolence. During his arrest, Jesus rebuked Peter for using a sword. It's Matthew 26, 52 and 53. Put your sword back in its place, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. A classic one. Jesus emphasizes that reliance on violence can lead to more harm, advocating trust in God's plan instead. So then, does it extrapolate to everything, would be the question. Jesus' willingness to endure suffering without resisting. Another example that pulls from Matthew. Isaiah 53:7, which was fulfilled in Christ. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter. That is Jesus. That was a prophecy about Jesus. So that was one that was fulfilled. Trusting God's protection, which was alluded to in the last one. Psalm 46:1 says, God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble, which the concept comes out 1,000 times in the Bible of that, to trust in God. Jesus, take the wheel, which is a horrible way to exegete on its own. Romans 12:19, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. Out of Romans, which is interesting because of the other Romans verse, 13:4. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoers. So in one breath,
Yeah.
it seems like the polar opposite. And this is why pulling random Bible verses doesn't work.
So one example of that, the one right there in Romans 13:4, is in Kings. So I don't know if a lot of you know, but like Israel was split up into two kingdoms, where it was Israel and then Judah. They had two different leaders, and there was areas of conflict, and God actually gave warning and heed to them, like, hey, to the leaders, like, you basically need to, it's almost like labor laws, you need to treat your people well, and do X, Y, and Z, and they basically didn't, and they got really, I don't know, arrogant and kind of power hungry, and they treated their people like shit. And as a result, there was violence. There was a political uproar. So I don't know if that's like something that's like prophetic, or if it's like a warning,
In what sense?
Which part?
Like a warning of what specifically?
Like, hey, if you don't treat your people well, then this is going to come upon you as a leader.
Okay.
But either way, it seems like God is like, hey, and this is where it goes back to like what I was saying, like the OG Geneva Conventions, like, yeah, there's just certain things that you just don't do. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, lines are clear, especially later. Lines are relatively clear. It's a stark contrast, though. If you're being honest, I'm a big supporter of violence under certain contexts. However, if you're being an honest student of the Bible, it is difficult for me to support with scripture my actual beliefs on violence, because the New Testament doesn't go into it extremely in depth. So it's all contextual, and it's not all. A lot of it, most of it is contextual. We have some of the things that we've gone over from the New Testament, mostly in Matthew and Luke, mostly from Jesus, and then there are some mentions from some of the other authors later. However, there is an overarching theme of not being passive, but of refraining from violence, and this push instead towards love. But then the underground theme through the rest of that is injustice. So then you end up in this really rough place of, okay, violence is not good. That's relatively clear. However, it's all meant to be injustice. So then what are the scenarios and circumstances where you can enact justice? And then what is justice? Because it seems like those are the only scenarios from Jesus forward that would be acceptable biblically to have violence around them. So then it becomes a justice talk.
I mean, I think the other part too that makes it challenging is we're only looking at a theocracy, right? So I don't know how it looked for in terms of like police force and other different forms of protection. So, you know, like we have now where it's like we can call for police, right? And let them handle it. And it almost seems like if there's other issues where it's like a more time sensitive manner than you know, we handle it ourselves. But
that's societal. So even ignore all that. Just as a principle, like, well, police are societal. Without society, you don't have police.
Right. But in terms of like, what would God have you do?
All right. And so I don't want to get bogged down with like the government or the theocracy or any of that stuff. Like if it was us, we lived in a commune and somebody broke into the commune to do harm. We knew they were going to do harm. They brought guns. They announced verbally they were going to do harm. Like a scenario like that. Because once you have that sorted out, you can extrapolate that to a societal level. But bringing a societal level down to the individual is more complicated. So if we were on a personal level, what would justify the violence, or would anything justify the violence? I mean, there are plenty of Christians who literally will tell you if somebody walks into their house with a gun and verbally says they're going to kill the person's kids, they would do nothing because one, Jesus told you not to, from the verses that are taken with no context, and two, because they trust in God to take care of it. Meaning, which as a Calvinist I get, because you literally believe rape is preordained by God, and in my opinion, you are an absolute psychotic person. But there are plenty of people that believe that stuff, that you have no personal responsibility. God will do everything. He's a puppeteer. Whatever happens was predestined, including rape, including murder, including child abuse and sex slavery. All of that was predestined. And just because you don't know the reason doesn't mean it wasn't for a good reason, which is fucking insane. Excuse my language. It's crazy.
Yeah, I agree.
So for the rest of us, because I don't think anybody here is like a hardcore Calvinist, I think pretty much everybody here believes in personal responsibility to a degree. If we all lived in the commune, our kids were there and all that jazz, and somebody came in announcing to do harm with tools to engage in harm, is self-defense justified? In taking the other person's life, I guess, to be clear.
I mean, it just sounds like a lot of it is circumstantial.
But I gave you a circumstance. I gave you one.
Yeah.
I'm doing what's justifiable in that circumstance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody not think that's justifiable? I don't think we have any of those people. Okay. I'd be shocked. Nat said, I'd argue that my defense of the innocent was also part of his plan. I think it's justified to protect the innocent life. I like that. Okay. Which is what I figure. Everybody here is kind of on the same page with something as blatant as that. So then now extrapolate it to a larger context. Oh, wait. David said violence in the Old Testament was diminished after the cross. As far as believers, not many enemies were loved in the Old Testament. Very true. Christ's love in us changes how we react to our enemies. Which is definitely true. So then now extrapolate this out. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please. Yeah, continue.
Okay, Scott said it's a natural response, but it's not black and white to say what is justified. Right, which is that's the tricky thing. As a Christian with the New Testament as your context, it in my opinion, it boils down to justice. Justice is approved. Any violence outside of that does not seem to be sanctioned by the New Testament. So then this question is relevant. And the question is actually, what is just and what is not? So then you do an entire new study, because now you have to study specifically what justice is and figure that out. Lucio said, when a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even the enemies to be at peace with him. What was that from? Where's that verse, Lucio? Okay, but now extrapolate it out. So,
Yeah.
and then I got to go in a few minutes, but pull it out now to a larger setting. So let's take just the United States. Nothing else exists on the planet. So 0 other contexts can be used for this example. All of the United States. We have somebody enter somebody else's home with no direct communication of or indication of that they want to commit violence. Somebody just walks in. They have no gun that you can see. They have no nothing, no tools of violence. They don't say anything to you. And they just start walking upstairs towards your baby's room. What is justified?
Well, what's their intention?
What's that?
What's their intention?
Well, you don't know. That's why it's a fun question. You have no idea. They won't talk to you.
I think that's a little weird. So I think it's justified because it's a random stranger going into your baby's bedroom in the middle of the night. It just isn't like it's not
Right. So, but then are you taking?
wait.
not right.
You're taking the person's
Wait.
life in your hands.
Right, and
I don't know if I would kill them right away.
well,
but-
that's how you shoot. You don't shoot to injure. You shoot to
Okay,
to
so
kill, which-
hold on. Picture it like this then. Literally, Patricia is near her front door. The baby is upstairs in the bedroom sleeping. A large man, muscular, very fit, but won't say anything to you. He just opens the front door and walks inside. He pushes you like by walking by you, not like aggressively pushes you, but brushes right past you and walks upstairs and goes for the doorknob of your baby's room. What do you do? Do you immediately call 911? Do you skip that because this feels like an immediate threat? How do you justify in your head? What are you going to do? And then how do you justify to yourself what you end up doing?
number one, you're in survival mode, so you're just not going to think straight anyways.
Right.
That's my concern. The other concern that I keep thinking about in this scenario is I know there was a guy in Texas where it was very similar. He thought there was an intruder. Turns out not only did they just have a baby, but they had a teenager who had snuck out of the house and was trying to sneak back in, and the guy ended up killing his teenager.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
And see, that's
I
so
guess
that's a risk. And that's what I was saying earlier is like,
Right.
if you don't know for sure, it's a game of probabilities. You could be right,
yeah.
and you could be right and save the innocent, or you could be wrong, and in that case, great example, you could be the one to take the life from the innocent.
Yeah, and it's your own innocence. Yeah, that's
Your-
something that I'll never
Your
forget.
own- yeah, that's wild. Patricia, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I don't know. Like I probably wouldn't have thought this in the moment, but because we're thinking about it, like what if they were just in the wrong house and they're actually your neighbor and you never met them before, but they thought
They
it
were
was
like,
their house. It's like,
yeah.
Or what if they were, like what if they had a mental handicap, meant no harm,
yeah.
couldn't speak to you, was confused, maybe like genuinely didn't know what was going on. Maybe they would have just opened the door and then been like, oh crap, now I realize this isn't where I'm supposed to be, and left. Like this is the paradox of like, at what point would that be considered justified? What if you walked into the room? What if you picked up your baby? He could mean harm.
Okay,
He could mean no
know.
harm at all. So
Yeah.
it's a game of probability. You roll the dice.
These are American
What do you do?
problems. Yeah, in Canada, you don't have that stuff. I know.
Yeah, in Canada,
But why
Patricia
is your
would go
door
to
not
prison.
locked?
To the door to
No,
what?
it was. You don't know. My teenager forgot their key,
There you go.
or they trying to go in the window because they didn't want to be hurt. I mean,
Because
man.
if the door was locked and they broke in, I think the question is easier. Because that
Yeah.
proves there's some kind of malintent, or at least makes it much more probable. Makes it much more probable.
That's why I always lock my door at night.
Yeah, of course. I don't know why. I didn't know you guys locked doors up
but an
there in
intrusion.
Canada. I thought it was safe up there.
Nope.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know. Nat said that's why my husband and I do break-in drills all of the time. I don't act unless they make their way to me, and our plan is to make ourselves very hard to get. Prevents accidents too.
But
see,
Nat,
that's smart.
yeah, but it's part of your routine to check the like the bedrooms and make sure everyone's at where they're at. I mean, I don't roll this way, so I don't know. Just curious, only because of like the situation I just give. You know, the guy heard something, immediately went downstairs and shot. He didn't think to check the other rooms, and you know what?
That's preventable.
No, sadly, yeah.
That's super sad. That's horrifically sad. Nat said it's just the two of us and our toddler, so right now it's easy to ensure. So yeah, so that would be something they'd have to kind of factor into the way that they run the drills later, once the kid is older. It's a finicky thing, man. It's a very tenuous topic. It's super thin because it's Rodrigo said it 1,000 times, but it's extremely like circumstantial, I think. But no matter what, it all boils down to the one thing, which is the word justice. And then it's all circumstantial from there. Well, if this and this, then what? And if this, this, and this, it's literally a game of probabilities. And how you stack them, it changes the way that you're engaging with the concept of justice by action. And whether what you're doing is, you know, call it permitted or sanctioned by God or not. But it's a thin, difficult thing for sure. Nat said, but you best believe I have a gun in the 3 doors were locked behind. That person wanted to get us and couldn't have had good intentions. Right, because that would be the normal scenario. If somebody breaks in your house, I think kind of all bets are off for most people. And unfortunately, there's a lot of places that's not true. And if you shoot somebody who walks into your house or breaks into your house, you will go to prison, which I think is insane.
That's another thing. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
So I understand the whole shoot to kill thing, but
yeah, but so then it's a new game of probabilities. Okay, do I shoot this person and possibly kill them and then leave my wife and my kids with no father because I will go to prison? Or how would you engage with that? But
I know for me,
you go to prison in the States for shooting out of self-defense.
In some
figure
states.
out.
No. In some states, no matter what. No matter what. Yeah. So they'll explain it like this. They'll say, if somebody breaks into your home, the only way you can kill them, and even then, you'll probably do some prison time, is if you get backed into somewhere where there's no possibility at all of you getting out and they are inflicting harm on you. Because what they tell you is that if somebody breaks into your home, don't you have a back door? Don't you have windows? You should be able to escape and not engage in violence. It's not a lot of states, but those states absolutely exist right
Which
now.
is why we shoot to kill, so that way there's only one version of the events. But homegirl, I want to know how it goes in Canada. Please explain.
Yeah, actually. In Canada, how does it work? Can you shoot someone who walks in your house?
Honestly, I haven't looked into this.
Okay. I didn't think so. In Canada, I thought that they had pretty rough regulations about it. But I don't know. Nat said, Joe, I'm glad you brought that up. My husband always gets all macho and says all the ways he'd defend us, but under a misunderstanding, it could ruin all of our lives. Yes, I've talked to Kat about that before. Like, there are a lot of things I will step in. Like, if somebody threatens her, whatever. Like, the thing that always comes to my mind is, like, if somebody were to catcall my wife or say something horrifically rude to her, the macho thing for me to do would be to go beat the shit out of him or hit him in the face or something. And then what? And then go to jail. And then not be a husband and not be a father. And possibly, I mean, you never know. People die from getting punched because they fall and hit their head on the curb. So then my kids grew up without a dad. Like, the macho thing sometimes is you are actually just, it's prideful. That's not the man thing to do. That's you being prideful and feeling like your wife will look at you differently. It is not the right move. If there isn't immediate violence, like somebody has a gun to Kat's head, it is very unlikely I would do anything at all. I would pull her away, we would walk away and then laugh about it. Because it is not worth kids losing their dad or her losing her husband. It's pride. Is all that is. Unless there's an immediate threat. An immediate threat. I hope that dies.
My daughter was like 16 or 15, maybe 16, and she was sexually harassed at work by a cook. And I remember I purposely positioned myself that was like away from the cameras. And I remember saying something to him that was vague enough where I couldn't be. Maybe I should stop talking. But yeah, I don't know. You just have to be careful.
You have to be careful. And nowadays with cameras and security cameras and you have to be careful nowadays. It's I don't know. I'm lucky my brain functions the way it does because I don't think a lot of guys do. But I see everything as a game of probabilities. Everything is just data. So if this, then what? And that's why I would never act on somebody just being rude to Kat. I might say something, but even then, like you're elevating the risk of that person, then their pride getting in the way, and them coming over, and then we do have an altercation.
Even that, I used to have such a bad mouth. Like, I would embarrass the living bejesus out of a dude for saying something rude to me, but people are too unpredictable now. I won't say anything.
I hope y'all heard that.
I won't even laugh.
Yeah, girl, I am so with you on that. That's how
That's why I don't worry about her. I don't need to say anything because she will.
Yeah, I'll make you regret stuff. I will humiliate you
Right.
if you keep going.
Right. It's all circumstantial at the end of the day. 100% of it is. But it sounds like everybody is in agreement for the most part that it's justified in certain scenarios. Patricia said she looked it up. Looks like it's similar in Canada. You could go to jail for self. That's what I thought. You can go to jail for self-defense if they determine it wasn't reasonable. Right. So, which I think that in Canada, from what I understand from listening to some people talk about it a while ago, was like theirs is 100% circumstantial. So the case will go to the court, and so it's a freaking coin toss.
That's a lot of tax dollars, yeah.
It's a lot of tax dollars, and it's a lot of risk.
Right.
It's a lot of risk. Nat said, I mean, even in the awful case, though, of someone saying essaying either of us, I still have to remind him to work with the law and not in violence, since it wouldn't be legally justified. Right, and that's the difference, is what is just and what is the law, because they're not the same thing in all cases. In most cases, it's a spectrum. Like, people who commit SA with kids often do less time than people who traffic narcotics, which is, in my opinion, fucking crazy. Crazy. And then they let them out, and then they just do it again, because it's not SA, but stuff with kids is the most. It is the crime where recidivism is the highest, and yet they get light sentences, light probation or parole, and then they just end up going back. But yeah, good point is that it's even in the case of that. That's one thing. Like, I don't know if I'd ever be able to live with myself, like letting that person survive if that happened to like my daughter or Kat. But at the same time, so then do I get what will make me feel better and make them go through that one and also not have me around anymore too, which is like, it's impossible to mentally deal with because either one just seems totally terrible.
Yeah, you either shoot to kill or shoot to shut up. I mean, or shoot to injure. So it's not. Yeah.
Exactly. We need y'all. Yeah, it's just not worth it. There are very, very few cases. And even in those few cases, depending on where you live, like where I live, I would not do violence of any kind for any reason, no matter what, probably. There are very few, because no matter what way you turn it with where I live, I would probably not be around anymore. Daniel Penny is in court now for self-defense choking a dude on the subway. Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with the case. I don't want to get super political, but I see both sides of what happened there, and I don't like that the dude might go to prison. I'll say that. There are also things that he could have done to mitigate, but that's a great example of like, where's the line? Where's the line? If people are an immediate threat, is he permitted to do that? Most people would say yes, and then it's an argument of, well, at some point he should have let him go or tried to restrain him in a different way. And that's really easy for people to say who are not doing it. Because when you're when adrenaline is thumping through your brain.
Yeah.
You're thinking about protecting in that moment and not dying yourself. You're not thinking about, okay, it's been 2 minutes. Might have been had him this way too long. I should probably move that. Like, that's crazy. You're just not going to do it. But it's also really sad to see somebody die, no matter
But
what.
there's still, I think Brown was her name, underage trafficked victim, and she ended up murdering the purchaser, the trafficking, and she got time.
I bet. Yeah.
Which is not,
It's not legally justified.
I think so.
Not legally. It's just.
She's a child assault victim, and
right. So
she
it's
was
just. You think it's just, which I don't disagree with, but legally, it's not justified, which is the line. So then the person, like, you would have to make the decision of, do I want justice, and am I willing to pay the consequences for my justice? Because our legal system is not just, is what the person would probably believe. It's the unfortunate way that it works. The old saying down south is, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
I like that.
That is pretty good. I never heard that before. All right. Anything else, guys? I'm gonna roll. I gotta get to bed.
Tupac lyric.
I don't like Tupac, baby girl. I was a Biggie Smalls kind of guy. You know this.
Oh my God, are you serious, Joe?
I don't listen to him anymore, but I used to listen. Yeah, I like him. He's good.
No.
He was good. I wasn't a Tupac guy. I wasn't a Tupac guy.
I
Nah.
was so West Coast, and the whole thing with Diddy, and he did it. Diddy did it.
Diddy did do it.
Oh my God.
I mean, I like Tupac. I just was never super into him.
Guy's a legend.
100% he is. Nat said, I think that there's more that would be legally justified than what would be forgiven or understood by God. Feels like the law is the bare minimum. That's interesting, because I kind of see it the other way. I feel like the law has gone way too far. Or maybe we're thinking over each other and not like connecting in the middle. But I think there are way too many laws. I think the laws are way too specific. There's like the old joke that's not a joke, is that the average person commits like dozens of felonies every year, and in many cases they're just not aware of it. Like, that's an example of the law going too far. Like, there's too much. But if you're talking about justice and law, then I would probably agree with you. Okay, maybe not forgiven, but understood without requesting forgiveness. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Lucio said Biggie over Tupac all the way, because Lucio is very smart. I can't get over Tupac being an actor from Baltimore, not a real gangster from the West Coast. Damn, shots fired.
Who said that?
Lucio, what are you? 1989? Is that when you were born? Yeah, no, honey. There's so much stuff going on way before that. He actually moved to the West Coast in his adolescence. There's just so much that you don't know.
Maybe it depends on intention. Yeah, I think most things depend on intention. David said people who judge harshly a self-defense fight have probably never been in one. Thank you. That's what I've always said. A lot of the guys that I've heard talking about, like, what violence should have looked like, I'm like, you are the guy who has never been punched in the face. You have never choked somebody. You have never had a knife around you. Like, you have never experienced violence, and that's why you can think the way that you think. God knows your heart. A judge doesn't. Right. Which is good, because then justice is just. I think that one of the big problems with like the justice system is that no, people don't know someone's actual intentions, so they have to guess, and so oftentimes justice is not just. One of the reasons. I'm going to bed. This was really good though. I thought it was going to be very slow. I was a little bit apprehensive, and you all completely changed my mind. Very good talk. I posted a poll already, because I'm trying to be a better person, for next week. So it's there. The ones I put on this week are, what is idolatry? Because that keeps almost winning, and then something keeps taking it over. Is the patriarchy bad? Was next on the list. Did Jesus become, or was he always God? Ghost and I talked about it a little bit, and really interesting topic. And then meditation versus prayer. What's the difference? Patricia posed meditation as a topic, and so I added the context, but then we can talk about it with whatever context she meant to. I think it'd be good. So make sure you go vote before Tuesday. Thursday, we're starting the Epic of Gilgamesh. So if you want to read along in the live streams on Discord, go to Bible study, Epic of Gilgamesh, and then I put the link to the PDF at the top. So that's the one we're gonna read. And then Sunday we're doing Genesis like normal. Is Fear of Death and Dying still on the table? I think that one also keeps almost winning. You're right, and no, it's not. It's still on the table, but I forgot to put it on this week. So I'll make sure I put it on next week, because you're totally right. That one almost won for 2 weeks too. I'll be sure to put that one on next time. This time I forgot though. But thank you for saying that. We'll make sure it's on the next one. All right. Any last words here before I go pass out?
What's that?
What's that?
Who wanted the Fear of Death and Dying?
That was yours, right?
Oh, Nat. Yeah. Yeah, that was mine, but
That's what
I
thought.
really wanna have that one.
Okay. I will actually, maybe I'll just cancel this poll and I'll put it on. Only 2 people have voted. I'll redo it.
What?
Re-vote. Just vote again.
Okay.
Good God. I'm giving you a chance to vote twice.
I've been having like narcissism for like freaking 2 years now, but okay.
Is that on the list even for this one? I don't think I put it on.
No, it's not. But
Well,
I
girl,
just think
you have
important.
fingers. You come in here and you go narcissism, and then I say dope, and then I put it on the list.
Oh,
Look at that.
That's
Okay.
a good
Look
one
at that.
too.
It'd be a really good one.
Girl, if
And
you only knew.
We never got to it last time when we were doing this. So I'll add narcissism, and then I'm going to take the poll down and I'll put it back up with the Fear of Death and Dying. And then,
Oh, it's hard to choose.
it's been hard
I
to choose.
know,
You
this is
guys
how it
keep
was.
tying. I need to start just putting absolute garbage up there, and then one of the ones everybody keeps voting for.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go to sleep. I love y'all very much. This was super good. Good chat. Good chat. Love y'all, and see you on Thursday for the Epic of Gilgamesh. Man,
Good night.
stoked. Love you guys. Night.